All right, I think we're ready to get started. I can see people pouring into the webinar. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So excited to have you all here. We are stoked to have you here specifically to talk about how IT teams use Lucid to solve complex problems. So if you're here because you want to learn more about how to use visual collaboration to solve your problems in IT, you're in the right place. If you were looking for something else, you might be in the wrong place, but this is definitely a good place to be. As people are joining, go ahead and take a minute to introduce yourself. If you've been in a webinar before, you know that there's a chat feature here in Zoom that you'll find at either the top or the bottom of your screen. Hop into the chat. Make sure that the chat is set for you to chat to everyone. There's a little drop-down menu there. Just chat to everyone versus just hosts and panelists. And just tell us like who you are, where you're joining from, what's your role. Maybe even share a little bit about what do you want to get out of today's webinar? Like, what are you hoping to learn today? Please drop that information in the chat. Help us to get to know you. But you know what? It's not fair for us to get to know you. We want you to get to know us as well. And so, hello, everybody. My name is Bear. That's Bear, like a grizzly bear. My wife says probably more like a teddy bear. You can weigh in at the end of today's webinar. But I manage our learning services team here at Lucid. So when we're teaching people all of the best ways to do visual collaboration for these various use cases, it's my team that's a lot of times delivering that training or creating that content that you can find at training.lucid.co. But I am mostly here just as a facilitator. I am not the show. The show is our friends Alan, Rocky, and Dave, and I'll turn the time over to them to introduce themselves right now.
Hi, my name is Alan Rees-Fortney. I am the director of IT here at Lucid. It is definitely Bear's show. We're just talking in it. This dude is awesome. And then with me, I have Rocky over in SRE, who can introduce himself now.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rocky Olson. I am the principal SRE software engineer and infrastructure architect at Lucid. Lifetime Linux nerd. Yeah, over to Dave, who will be doing our demos.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Bennett. I'm a senior solution engineer here at Lucid. I've been at Lucid for about 5 years now, and hopefully we'll be able to show you something interesting, most particularly how our IT teams here at Lucid use Lucid to solve complex problems.
All right, terrific, gang. Thanks so much for introducing yourselves. And again, welcome to everybody in the chat. I see Stan, I see Andy, Kimberly, Dean, Kevin, Anne Marie. Hello, all of you. And I mean, there's 400 plus of you right now, so I'm not going to say hello to all of you, but I want you all to know I am so excited to have all of you here. Now, before we get started, before we get too far into the webinar, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items. This is part of the course for trainings and webinars. First of all, the question at the top of everyone's minds, usually in the webinar, is the webinar being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded, and you can expect an email with a link to the recording within about a day or two of today's webinar. It'll be sent to whatever email that you used in order to register for this webinar. Even if you have to leave early, you'll be able to attend this webinar, or if you have colleagues that signed up and weren't able to make it, they will still get a copy of the recording as well. That email will also include some additional resources, including some ready-to-use templates from the webinar today. Okay, so we're going to get you some resources so that you can actually do some of these things that you're going to learn about today. And many of you are already participating in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. Please keep it up. We want to hear from you. This is your time. This is not really our time. This is your time. We want to make sure you get as much value as possible out of the webinar. Continue to use the chat, but if at all possible, please use the Q&A for any questions that you have throughout the session. So if you have specific questions for the presenters, for myself, about Lucid software, about any of these use cases, if you use the Q&A, that makes it easier for our teams to asynchronously answer your questions, because we're probably not going to be able to answer all of them on air. And it keeps your question and the answer to your question together, so it's a lot easier for you to find the answers to your questions and for others to be able to see those as well. Now, if you ask questions in the chat, we'll still see them, we'll still try to get to them. It just takes a little bit longer, and it's always possible that your question could get buried in the chat. So, but continue to use the chat to forecast excitement, to comment on what's going on, or to provide any sorts of feedback that are not general questions. And last but not least, For any of you who are like me and can sometimes struggle to hear well during these types of webinars, we do enable live captions for this webinar. So if you click the options, typically at the top of your screen, you'll be able to turn those on, and you can go ahead and turn those on right now if you like. All right, now, with all of that out of the way, let's set the table for our discussion. We know that IT teams today, much like yours, are under tons of pressure. You're responsible for keeping systems running smoothly, resolving tech issues, finding ways to optimize architecture. There are a lot of priorities on your plate, okay? And juggling priorities, that's tricky, right? It's tough. We know that managing those priorities is difficult, and it requires oftentimes a ton of collaboration, both with other IT professionals and other technical teams, and also, and I know you guys feel this, non-technical teams like myself. That can be a little bit frustrating to work with sometimes. So we would love to hear from you. So sound off in the chat. What are some of the biggest challenges that you are facing today in your work in IT? Like, please share some of that with us in the chat. We'll give you a minute to tell us about some of the challenges that you face. We really want to know, again, what are the greatest collaboration and alignment challenges that you are facing in IT today? Oh, siloed teams. I feel that one. Alignment of siloed work. Oh, okay, we're seeing silos coming in.
Yep.
+1 to siloed team. Resource planning. Brainstorming remotely. Oh gosh, so many good here. Last minute work changes. Scope
Yep.
creep. Oh God. I mean, I feel some of those
Information overload.
There's so much now. As more of these answers are coming in, Alan, Rocky, like, do any of these responses resonate with you as IT professionals?
All of
I
them.
mean, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, all of them. Especially, I like the one up here: impatient administrators. That never happens anywhere, right?
Yeah. I think effectively communicating a design vision is something that, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and Lucid's great for doing that. You can't really describe network flows or security groups or any of those things in a Word document as well as you can with a well annotated picture.
Also, I just saw a response come through the chat. I love it. Less skilled management. That's so good. So, like, we hear this stuff all day, every day on our teams, when we're in training, when we're working with end users, feedback that we get in our materials, what we hear from customers as we're working, we hear these same types of challenges. Competing priorities are a huge problem. Okay, juggling those priorities is always at the top of the list. Lack of visibility into current state. And the need to communicate technical information to non-technical teams or less skilled management, as one of our friends pointed out in the chat. And along with all this, you're working on your priorities, like you're trying to make a difference with the organization, but you've got to balance that with one-off requests that come into your organization that are also important to keep things running. And then as you're trying to improve and document your processes, that can be very manual and time consuming. And all of these things are compounded by, I think, silos, which is another one that's not on this list, but that got called out, like these types of silos that can make all of this very difficult. And these are exactly the types of challenges that we feel visual collaboration is uniquely positioned to solve, because it helps to not only improve collaboration, but to drive alignment through your teams and to create clarity out of all of this mess and complexity, whether that is using Lucidspark, our virtual whiteboard, to brainstorm, ideate, and plan, whether that's Lucidchart, our intelligent diagramming application for things like documenting processes and technical systems. We think these things help with these problems. And our IT teams at Lucid, we do use them, and we do see a lot of alleviation of these pains and challenges as a result. I've actually heard, you guys, if I get the details wrong, then please feel free to jump in, that thanks to Lucid, our IT team, sorry, I can't word properly today, has a pretty impressive user to help desk ratio, 300 to 1. Now, So tell me more about that number, because I don't have as much context, right? Like, is that good?
Yeah, it's really good for a company of our size, right? Lucid is in the, sub 5,000 employees range, and depending on how big your company gets, you can usually keep increasing that ratio as you buy different tools and things like that. So sitting, in my opinion, at 1 to 300 for a company of Lucid size is really good.
Excellent. Thank you for that context. And so again, a lot of this benefit we think is coming from visual collaboration. We want to talk to you about some of these use cases that our teams find the most value out of. So enough of me like preambling this solution. We obviously can't cover every single way that all of you could use Lucid in our time together, but we do want to show you our most favorite use cases that I really hope will provide you with some inspiration, and that you can start applying immediately. Like as soon as you get out of this webinar, you should be able to start applying these learnings. And if you can't get started immediately within the next day or two, remember, we're going to send you the recording and some follow-up templates of some of these use cases. So we're going to make it really easy for you to get started and start feeling this value. So without further ado, let's hand things off to, I believe, Alan, to talk us through our first use case, which is more about project planning and roadmaps.
Yep, thanks. So the first use case we want to talk about is project planning. So like most IT teams, we have a ton of initiatives that we could pursue, but only so much time. So we need to be really good at prioritizing, right? Lucid helps us prioritize and plan better than any other tool I've used. How we used to do this previously is we get everybody in a conference room or a Zoom call, go around a table, have everyone talk about their projects and figure out what was going to make the cut and what we didn't have resources for at that time. What we do now is we use visual collaboration activities and things like that in Lucid to quickly get consensus on what is the most important use of our resources inside of Lucid. And it allows everyone to contribute equally and quickly. And it's really slick, it's easy to use, and it solves a really complex problem really quickly. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave, who's going to show you exactly what we're talking about.
Thank you, Alan. And everybody bear with me for a second. This is going to be a little bit wordy, but hopefully we'll be able to get through really the different relationships between Lucidspark and Lucidchart, how they work for project planning, particularly when it comes to those three main areas that were on that previous slide around the brainstorming and alignment, utilizing those visual activities that Alan spoke to, and then how we can integrate with your project management solutions to actually move into action and get that work completed. So with that, I have a really nice template that's been put together particularly for demoing that project planning and how you get this done. So a lot of this is already filled out, but hopefully you'll get the gist. Now, right now we're sitting in Lucidspark, and Lucidspark is our whiteboarding solution. It's been designed for meeting facilitation as well as other whiteboarding use cases that you might have. And so as I zoom in here, you'll notice that we have a couple of different steps here. And the first step is brainstorming and tagging, where you would be able to come in and drag out sticky notes, start to add content to that brainstorming session. You'll be able to do things like adding emoji reactions on if you think something's a good idea, or if something's not necessarily as important as another area. You'll also be able to tag different elements. And so the tags that I'm using in this particular board are related to the team, the priority levels, as well as the amount of work that a particular task might actually take. And so that first step is going to be around that brainstorming, getting those ideas onto the canvas. The next piece of that would then be to start getting into some of those discussions, voting on these different tasks or areas of interest that you need to work on. And there's going to be features here in Lucidspark that really focus in on that discussion and voting piece. For example, you're going to be able to set a timer to time box that agenda item. You're going to be able to come in and actually set up a full voting session where you'll be able to do things like specifying how many votes per object, being able to specify what types of objects you should vote on, or if you want that voting session to be anonymous. And there's going to be a lot of flexibility here from the voting and discussion piece. Now, on top of that, Lucid also has a few AI pieces that are going to help you with organization, help you with that discussion as well. Now, I'm not going to be able to go in depth to the AI piece specifically, but it is our collaborative AI. And there's actually a webinar that we've recorded previously that goes more in depth to that. But at a high level, you can do things like selecting all of your different sticky notes and then choosing to sort through those ideas, generate more ideas based off of the content that was already there, or do something like summarizing that content that's there on the screen. And so giving you the ability to dive into some of those areas very, very quickly with minimal effort. Now, on top of that, we are also going to be able to not only sort or summarize via that collaborative AI, but if you've gone through and chosen to tag particular items based off of that priority level that I spoke about previously, or based off of the team like I spoke about previously, you'll also be able to sort based off of those elements like I've done here. Now, once we've gone through that discussion and that voting and the gathering and organization, you might have a set of high priority items. And you might want to refine those high priority items down into sprints during like a PI planning session, for example. And that's where those visual activities come into play that Alan was speaking to previously. Our visual activities are like voting on steroids, where we have the ability to set up a template where you can drag out one of these visual activities that are a vertical axis activity, or an impact versus effort matrix, or estimate the task, which is going to be like a planning poker type session. And then you can drag the sticky notes into that visual activity. And once it's set up and ready to go, you can start that visual activity, and you're only going to see your own interactions. So that's going to remove a lot of those biases where I wouldn't be seeing what Alan is doing, what Rocky is doing. And I have the ability to say, hey, this is something that we should really focus on. Or, you know what, this might be incremental. And even though it might be a high priority compared to other elements, compared to these other high priority initiatives, maybe it's not as important for us. And so you have that ability to very quickly add those ideas and submit your response to the rest of the group. And as others come in and complete that visual activity, you can actually view those results. You can see the average, you can see the individual participation as well. And then lastly, for those that want this to be anonymous, we also have an anonymous viewing mode, or an anonymous visual activity that you can set up. So there's a lot of capabilities here to make sure that everybody's voices are being heard during those project planning sessions, and making sure that everybody's on the same page. Now, once you've gone through that process of organizing, once you've gone through that process of gathering that necessary information, comes the time where you're now going to want to push these work items into your project management solution. Now, to do that, there's a couple of different things that you can do. One is I can choose to just select a subset of these sticky notes, right click on that, and I can convert every single one of those items into Jira. And it does look like I'm no longer authenticated there, but it's going to make it so that I can literally just push every single one of those sticky notes into a Jira task. And it's going to look a little bit like this, where I can then go in and edit directly in Lucidspark my Jira work items. And it's bidirectional. So if I make a change in Jira, that change is going to be reflected here in Lucid. If I make a change in Lucid, that change is going to be reflected in Jira. And that works not only with Jira, but with Azure DevOps, with Asana, with Monday.com, with Smartsheet, and a slew of other project management solutions as well. The last step that you might go through then is putting a full project plan together, putting everything into a timeline, and making sure that you have alignment on when that work needs to be completed. With that, that is the overview that I wanted to cover for project planning. But Alan, Rocky, anything else that you wanted to bring up here in terms of that workflow?
And I'm muted. How about that? Just one really quick thing that I found really interesting using this process is I think a lot of people that run IT teams often really know that sometimes the most skilled and knowledgeable people about a certain subject matter are not the most vocal in meetings. And so this process is really good at getting information like out and building consensus with everybody. And it's a lot more interesting and engaging than a typical kind of like roundtable discussion. And it helps us realize when there's not consensus, right, amongst team members, and it helps us eliminate those types of issues really, really quickly.
Perfect.
Yeah, just to add on to that, like we use this a lot in even our own planning. And a lot of times when we're doing creative ideation, I really like to start with using some retrospective activities, particularly if you're familiar with hot air balloon or sailboat retrospectives, are really, really great for like figuring out how to solve a problem. And then we'll turn that into a how might we exercise, and then eventually do a 10 for 10. If you don't know what these things are, you can Google them, but they're creative ideation exercises that help you like get a lot of really great ideas on the canvas. But speaking to this piece about collaborative equity, the idea that like, I've got all these things on the board. And so if we're doing a retrospective and like, I see that, you know, for whatever reason, like Alan hasn't like put a lot of stickies on the board, I can say, hey, Alan, I see that you don't seem to have a lot of opinions here. Like, tell me, like, are you still processing? Do you need more time to think about that? Or do you just like not feel like you have an opinion? And it can help make sure that you're pulling those perspectives out. So like, I love that. Fantastic. All right. Now, I think we can wrap this one up and move on to the next use case. And this is one... Okay, I am not familiar with the concept of postmortem. This is not something that I normally do in the course of my own job. This is, I don't know, a little grim from my perspective. So can you tell me, like, what is this kind of like a retrospective? Like, can you guys walk like me through this a little bit real quick before we hop into it? Just give me a little context.
Yeah, Rocky, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So it is a little morbid, but you know, in the IT architecture SRE world, you know, usually if something bad has gone wrong, something died. The server died, a process died, an application died. So it is a little on the grim, a little tongue in cheek. You know, with Agile and the SRE movement and DevOps, blameless postmortems is really like how we like to run those, where it's about not assigning blame, but finding out the root cause and how do we as an organization grow and get better. You know, we used to do those in Word documents, but there was lots of issues, like it's very text heavy, made it really hard for us to get points across. There wasn't a lot of collaboration in a Word doc. You know, if you've ever had dozens of people editing the same bullet list and, you know, Word just doesn't sync, you know, the ability to just drop sticky notes and draw arrows, it's so powerful. One of the biggest things that I love about doing our postmortems in Lucidspark or Lucidchart is, again, those integrations with Jira and with things like Lucidscale. We can import live diagrams of what the environment looks like. All of our postmortems have like action items that we call prod issues, and those can get just stuffed right into Jira. We can track them and it can be a living document. So the process is just so much easier and collaborative now that we have Lucid. It allows us to take something that used to be used to feel very complicated and gives us an elegant solution that's easy to share and iterate.
Yep. And so here with this, with this example, sometimes we use the postmortem process for workflow issues and things that aren't even technical in nature sometimes, right? And so what you'll see here is an example of a postmortem document that we use to talk about team interactions. And I believe this example is around the new hire process and getting a laptop shipped to an end user effectively and timing out communications between multiple teams and how that user received them in order to make sure that we have tight communication from multiple teams and that it all lines up properly with the device arriving at their home. And I'm going to hand it over to Dave to walk through it.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. Now, on this particular demo, there's a couple of things that I want to highlight. And the first is, you know, this is the outcome of a postmortem that you might have seen in our How IT Teams Use Lucid video that we published a little while back. And there's quite a few steps that it took to get to this end result. And one of the big pieces here is utilizing Lucidchart and Lucidspark hand in hand. And so when you're starting to look at this particular timeline, it's not our base Lucidspark timeline that you drag and drop out and can change the time window or the periods of time that you're looking at. It's simply aligned with some dots on it. And frankly, for that type of timeline, Lucidchart is actually a little bit better for that. And so wanting to highlight here that Lucid is going to give you the ability to switch back and forth between the editing experiences that you're needing to use depending on your particular workflow. In this case, I might have started here in Lucidchart and, you know, started to drag and drop out these these particular dot shapes and place them on that canvas in a particular area. And you know, from here, I might then choose, you know, now that we have that base set of shapes in, now we want to add some clarity. We want to add some context. And we might start doing that with the sticky notes that you're going to have in Lucidspark. So once again, switching back to my Lucidspark editor, because that's where I'm going to have the tool set to work on this particular postmortem. Now, on top of that, we not only used both Lucidchart and Lucidspark for creating this, but we also utilized, once again, our collaborative AI, where we can select the entire set of objects that are here and choose to summarize that. And that's where I'm getting this nice executive summary from. So rather than Alan or Rocky having to sit there and figure out what that executive summary needs to look like, we can use our collaborative AI features to give us that outcome for us quickly and easily. So with that, just wanting to highlight that utilizing both Lucidspark and Lucidchart hand in hand is going to make this postmortem type workflow significantly easier. On top of that, Alan or Rocky, anything else that you wanted me to mention here, particularly when it pertains to postmortems?
I think just really quick, I know this seems like a really simple document, but communication is a complex issue. And I think this really is a good example of the power of the Lucid Suite to be able to take something that's really complicated and come up with a really elegant and easy solution. This is something that we put together relatively quickly with our stakeholders on the fly. And it allowed us to convey a complicated issue to, you know, senior executives and things like that really, really quickly, and with a minimum amount of follow-up questions or asking for, you know, further detail and things like that.
You know, just to follow up on that, Alan, our trainers train, I mean, literally tens of thousands of users a year. And we frequently hear that some of the most valuable interactions are simple diagrams, just like this, that you literally build on the fly, like in 10 or 15 minutes, because you either set up a Slack huddle or like a Teams chat, or maybe just like jump into a Zoom meeting real quick, open up a board, lucidspark.new. You literally just type in like lucidspark.new, you spin up a new blank board, and then people just start adding some of this stuff to the canvas. And in 10 minutes, they've turned their conversation into this visual. And again, it looks and feels very simple, but the power of getting that out of your head and onto the canvas is the thing that drives alignment and takes that complexity and makes it clear for everyone to understand. And so I'm just doubling down that, like, we see that a ton whenever we interact with our end users as well.
Awesome.
All right, now let's keep things rolling into our next use case. This is one that's definitely a little bit out of my depth: architecture reviews. Again, I'm less technical here. My entire career has been as a trainer. I know a lot about facilitating and running creative ideation and those kinds of things. But getting into this more technical bit, like, I'm definitely going to lean really heavily on you guys. So please walk us through how Lucid helps with architecture reviews.
Yeah, so technical challenges are best solved through collaboration. We use Lucid to work together and get feedback and solve problems. Architecture groups are often seen as draconian, shadowy cabals that we gatekeep technical decisions and prevent engineers from being able to get real work done. At Lucid, we want to tear down those walls and create a collaborative process where engineers can propose ideas, consider questions that they hadn't, and build consensus among technical leaders at our company. Instead of lengthy text documents that are the tired standard at other organizations, at Lucid, when someone initiates an architecture review via a Slack integration, we provide them with a template to fill out with stickies, contextual diagrams, and they can include Lucidscale imports. Once we reach a consensus on a meeting through discussions, we can vote using our voting features, emojis, or the visual activities, which is really powerful. We then have a living document to refer back to for future discussions. We often take those the solution that has the consensus, and we can run that through our AI features to generate executive summaries or project descriptions for teams going forward. Yeah, with that, to Dave.
Okay, this is one of my favorite areas of Lucid to demo, if I'm being completely honest. And that's because a lot of our architecture review boards are taking pieces from Lucidchart and particularly our different data imports. And so with that, while your architecture review process might be primarily in Lucidspark like this one, and you might have a couple of things set up to jump around to the appropriate content or area there within that board, there's a lot of flexibility to make sure that you're jumping between the right different areas at the right point in time. Now, on top of that, wanting to highlight that not only do you have all of these different areas that you can jump around in, but you can also start to link your technical documents directly into your postmortem. In this case, I have just grabbed the URL from a Lucidchart document, and when you paste it into Lucidspark, it is going to create an editor experience where I can actually come in and make changes to my Lucidchart document, add in different templates, access my different shapes, import different data elements, and it's just going to come in as an iframe or a modal within my Lucidspark document. So giving me a lot of flexibility to link my technical documentation into that architecture review Lucidspark board. Now, on top of that, by having that capability to link your more technical diagrams into your workspace, I am now also going to have the ability to take my documents that are imported from different sources. So Lucidchart is going to give you a large number of data imports. So for example, I know in the chat, there were some questions around being able to create entity relationship diagrams from SQL schemas, and Lucidchart is going to give you those capabilities. Or around Lucidscale, which allows you to import AWS diagrams like this one. And then in this case, I actually exported it into Lucidchart so that we can come in and look at proposed changes for a particular diagram. And so that's going to give me a lot of flexibility to have, once again, those more technical documents linked directly into my architecture review board process. Okay, Alan, Rocky, anything else that you wanted to mention there?
No.
I can't think of anything.
Okay, perfect. And bear with me for just a moment. One of my links got a little bit backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the appropriate document. Okay. With that, Bear, back over to you, I guess.
All right. Thanks, Dave. All right, Alan, Rocky, Dave, thank you guys so much. It's so cool to see how you guys are using Lucid in your everyday work for like both deep and technical diagramming, as well as just collaborating and working together on some of these like lighter weight solutions that just help facilitate better conversation and collaborating. So thank you guys so much for being willing to come here and share those use cases and kind of dive in deep with them. Now, before we jump into answering questions, because we want to make sure we have plenty of time to answer your questions, we've got some resources here. You can see the QR codes on the screen that you can use to take some of these things we've talked about and put this information into action. So what are each of these links? Well, for kickstarting your documentation, we've put together a toolkit specifically for IT teams with over 15 templates for documenting everything from your roadmaps, plans, to complex technical systems. And as a bonus, this documentation in Lucid makes it really easy for you to communicate with both technical and non-technical teams. These templates have been set up specifically to be able to do both of these things. So that is the first option that you'll see here on the left. Now, for better streamlining your work, we offer over 100 integrations, including with Jira, Azure DevOps, Google Workspace, Atlassian, Slack, Asana, just to name a few. So you can check them out here in our integration marketplace. And as I mentioned in the chat, if you didn't see, if we don't currently have an integration, one, you can request it. Okay, we have a space for you to request those integrations, but also you can check out developer.lucid.co, where we have some really user-friendly APIs and excellent documentation that would allow you to build some of your own integrations as well. So definitely check out the integrations marketplace with our second QR code here in the middle of the screen. And then finally, maybe you want to connect with some other IT professionals. I mean, I think that these use cases are great and they apply broadly to everybody, but also it's a little bit of Lucid, you know, patting ourselves on the back about Lucid. And so if you want to talk to some other IT professionals who are using Lucid to get value every day and see some of the things that they're doing and get some advice and best practices from them, then on the right-hand side, you can check out our IT community group. That will allow you to interact with a great community of IT pros just like yourself. And then you can ask questions, share how you're using Lucid, and just in general, deepen your knowledge of visual collaboration. All right, now we have plenty of time set aside for questions. These webinars, oftentimes we want to spend most of the time answering questions so that, again, you came here with certain expectations of the types of value that you would like to receive. And we want to make sure that if you haven't gotten that yet, this is your opportunity to do so. So we want to open it up to the group. We would love to use the Q&A to allow you to ask any of our speakers today questions about the different topics, about the different use cases, about our product generally. So please drop those questions in the chat. And then for our moderators who are joining us here on the webinar, please let us know if there are any questions that are kind of top of mind that we should be surfacing here immediately. Now let's have a look. Now, I did see some conversation in the chat about this. And so just to kind of get our conversation started while we're kind of catching up with all the different questions. One question that I think that I've seen here in the chat is, you know, well, what about Lucidscale? You talked a little bit about, like, I heard Lucidscale. We didn't really dive into it super deeply. How does Lucid help with teams who are trying to manage the cloud? What does this look like? How can Lucidscale help? How can other Lucid products help as well? Like, team, how do we feel about that?
So I will. I'll jump in, and I'm sure Alan and Rocky both have an opinion on this as well. But Lucidscale really came out of a Skunkworks project, essentially from our director of DevOps at the time. He's now a VP, but he essentially created an AWS import so that he wouldn't have to create AWS diagrams over and over again. And so Lucidscale actually gives you the ability to reverse engineer documents from AWS, Azure, or GCP based off the infrastructure that's actually deployed. We give you the ability to import via cross-account roles, or via a GCP service account, or via an AD application, and directly create those diagrams. And in so doing, making sure that your documentation is completely accurate, because it was reverse engineered. But more importantly, those diagrams are backed by metadata. And so you can start to look at things like finding unencrypted databases, or looking at if you are deploying a public IP address on a VM that shouldn't have a public IP address. And so it gives you a lot of capabilities, particularly for those architecture review board processes, to make sure that what was built was as designed. And it's a pretty powerful tool for that, as well as for discovering resources that maybe you didn't know were deployed.
We find a lot of value with the Lucidscale diagrams in our audits with external auditing companies, right? They'll say, give us a diagram of what your infrastructure looks like right now. And we can say, well, this was imported as of an hour ago. And so this is up to date. And, we can walk through the security groups. We can walk through whatever it is they need to see. It's not something that every time we deploy a new service, Rocky needs to remember to go update the Visio doc or something along those lines. It's really powerful in that sense.
Very cool. Now I've got a list of questions here that I can kind of answer. Thanks everybody and keep adding those questions. Like we want to get to as many of them as we can in this section. So next question: is it possible to plan based on team capacity? I think that you guys will have some opinions about this, but really quickly, just because I work for the services organization here at Lucid, we do have some premium templates that are available as a part of some of our services packages that allow where we've already built all of the back-end infrastructure needed in order to do this types of capacity planning, either for your team specifically or for like big room planning across multiple teams. And not only do we have specialized templates that we've already built out that we can deliver as a part of like an implementation, we also have other services that allow us to come in and do consulting and do deep training with your organization on how to do these things. So if you have an enterprise account at your company, or if you are considering upgrading to an enterprise account, or if you're not sure, go ask your admin and see. Definitely make sure they ask about Lucid's professional services offerings, because we can do a lot of this stuff for you, and we have thought through a lot of some of these types of things. But as far as answering a little bit of the questions around, hey, can we do that? How do we do that? I want to turn that over to the team to talk about maybe how they're doing that or how they think about that in their work.
On top of that, just wanting to add on to what Bear said there when it comes to capacity planning, we actually have an org chart import that allows you to generate org charts based off of a spreadsheet. And we have many customers utilizing that specifically for team capacity planning, adding in any new hires that you would need to make and making sure that they're on the appropriate teams. And then our VP of engineering has a beautiful document that he uses, and it's actually in our how Lucid uses Lucid videos that we've put out recently around how not only is he using that org chart, but you can also break that out into what we call smart containers or a group view, and he's utilizing the org chart and that group view to do Scrum team planning. And so there's quite a few capabilities there in utilizing some of those data imports that we have, particularly when it comes to team capacity planning.
All right, thanks, Dave. Now the next question I think might actually be specifically for you, Dave, because I think it's about one of the examples you showed earlier. How did you get those timestamps on each card and organize the cards on that postmortem example?
Yep, let me get back there. Okay, so on this particular postmortem example, we actually were tried to keep this light. And so rather than having the timestamps be added automatically or anything like that, these are actually just text. So it's nothing fancy, it's just there. With that being said, we do have our Lucid cards. And so while we do integrate with Jira, Azure DevOps, Asana, Monday.com, Trello, ClickUp, you could always just drag out one of our Lucid cards. And within these Lucid cards, you can add your title, your description, your status, your assignee, and then also that date range. And so if you are wanting to utilize Lucid for project management light, if you want to call it that, the Lucid cards is a great way to start to build out these different types of timelines and other features that are going to be right in line with utilizing them in a timeline. Now, to top that off, these timeline shapes that we can drag and drop out, and you can customize that date range, that unit of measure. So if you wanted to break things out by sprints, you could. These Lucid cards actually fit into these dynamic timelines. And then as you come in and start to add details, so maybe I'm adding a status where this is in to do or something along those lines, you can actually have these timelines set up to break out by status. And so that's going to give you a lot of flexibility to come in and start to make more of a dynamic timeline than what we use in our postmortem doc that we showed. Now, with that being said, one of the reasons that we did things a little bit lighter weight than utilizing our more robust timeline is something that Rocky and Alan mentioned previously around trying to solve a hard problem in the simplest way possible. And so we did want to keep this one just a little bit simpler, even though we have some of those built-in features that could be more robust.
Thank you very much, Dave. Now, this one's a really interesting question. So I do want to preface this by saying, I have done this. My team has done this in our product. And so I know our product can be used for this kind of thing. But the question is, are there templates in Lucidspark for doing things like a software evaluation or discussion in order to compare multiple pieces of software that have very similar functionality? Do you guys know, like, do we have any templates around that specifically? I know that my team's manually built out this type of thing before, but I don't know if we have any templates for it.
You know, I actually don't know, Bear. I'm very rarely stumped on questions around templates, but that one stumps me. While I don't know for certain if we do have something that is around software evaluation, what I will say is we do have thousands of standard templates, and there might be something around project planning that might relate to a particular software procurement process. And so I would go ahead and actually just open up our templates library and take a look and see if there's anything that meets your specific needs. In this case, we do have like a software design document that might be similar to what you're looking for. But in terms of specifically a software evaluation or procurement process, I actually don't know.
Right on. Well, I'm not in the... Oh, Rocky, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think all the ones that we've done have been our own custom thing. I will say that we do use the Google Sheets integration. So like we can do our scoring matrix in a Google Sheet and then, actively real-time import that into the evaluation. So all the math is there and we can, include pictures and diagrams and, product documentation in the chart or Spark, both products. Yeah.
I will say, I'm not on the board with you, so I can't try to demonstrate, but we did a 6-figure software purchase in the last 3 or 4 months or so. And as I was preparing for that software evaluation, the way that I kind of set up my board, and we use this board to like have a discussion with our CFO here at Lucid. The way that I set up my board is I kind of just use sticky notes, yellow sticky notes, to list out the like dozen or so requirements that we had for this software solution. Okay, so we had a dozen or so, and so there was a sticky note. We just kind of put them all in a column, one on top of the other, and then we had kind of a container for each software solution that we were evaluating, and then we would put a sticky note that was on the same line as the requirement, and then we would put notes in that sticky note about how well it met that requirement, and then we would change the color of the sticky note to be green if it like really hit all the high notes, yellow if it was like workable but not ideal, and red if it absolutely did not meet the requirement. And that helped us get a really good, quick visual sense of which of those technologies were viable. When you look at a glance, 5, 6, 7 different pieces of software at once, and you look at the red, yellow, green stickies, you immediately get a sense for which ones are not viable solutions and which ones are viable solutions. And then you can spend time having conversations about the right ones. So again, I don't know if we have a template or not, but that's how I have handled that solution in the past. And Rocky had some really good thoughts and Dave was talking to that as well. So hopefully you got what you needed from there. This next question, I am super jazzed to talk about because it is right in my wheelhouse. Where is a good place to learn more about how to use Lucidspark? Can you please share training links to learn Lucid architecture diagrams and Lucidspark usage? Well, if you want to learn more about how to use our product really, really well, then my friend, please visit training.lucid.co. This is what my team does all day, every day, is we create learning, training, educational content for how to use visual collaboration for a bunch of different use cases. So if you go to training.lucid.co, you'll be able to get access to some of our badge pathways. So you can actually earn badges that you can add to your LinkedIn profile for things like how to do basic diagramming, how to do basic whiteboarding, as well as creative facilitation and intelligent diagramming. And we're continuing to add more badges in the future. I think we're actually even potentially working on an agile badge that will come out later this year. And so there's lots of stuff there. There's also a section where you can dive into some specific use cases, and you can get quick guides and what we call fast classes or cheat sheets that will allow you to dive into some specific use cases. We have webinars, public free webinars that we do where we dive in specifically how to do things like what we're talking about today that you can sign up and register for. And we have a very substantial tutorial video library of over 100 tutorial videos that you can find as well. And all of this information is available from training.lucid.co. So definitely check that out. And if any of you are really interested in diving in super deep with Lucid, we do have a verified Lucid Builder credential that you can earn, but access to that credential does need to be purchased through your account executive. So you potentially want to work with like your admin or whoever is the Lucid stakeholder at your company to say, hey, we're potentially interested in doing this. If we run this program at your organization, we can do it for up to 25 people at once. But people complete a multi-week session, getting into 90-minute hands-on workshops, completing some of these badge pathways that I've talked about. And then there's an exam at the end that allows you to earn a verified Lucid Builder credential. So you can say, hey, I'm kind of a Lucid expert. So if you're interested in any of that, you can get started at training.lucid.co. But if you're interested in more advanced credentials, you can always work with your admin or your Lucid stakeholder to talk to your AE about any options that we have there. All right, next question. Will Lucid add custom properties to objects like Visio does to store further information on a device? I think that you are asking about like metadata or custom data and how to ask that to shapes. Dave, would you walk us through a little bit of what that looks like? And if you think that they're talking about something else, feel free to talk about that as well.
That's what I would assume as well, Bear. And I actually have a really embarrassing story about this. If I could be open for a couple of minutes with.
Oh, you can be open for more than a couple of minutes if you like.
So when I was interviewing for Lucid, I created a server rack diagram, and the reason that I did that is I used to wear a very different hat. I used to rack and stack servers, create server rack documentation for a company I used to work for, and when I was interviewing at Lucid, they asked if there was anything that I wish that Lucid could do. And I said, I wish there was metadata on shapes and I could add custom properties. And the person I was interviewing with said, well, actually there is. And so I'm gonna go ahead and share that with you real quick. The way you do that is you go ahead and click on a shape. And in that top right-hand corner, you can open up that context panel. Now, the base option is going to be layout. This is going to be like custom shape options, depending on the shape that you're looking at. But if you go ahead and then click on data, this is where you can actually add custom properties. So with that server rack diagram that I had created during my interview process, after I was hired at Lucid, I actually went back through and added quite a few different custom values to that diagram, indicating what type of server it was, what type of network switch, firewall, all of that. And so that information will be available within that document. And I actually use that document to demo that particular feature when I'm talking to individuals in IT, since it's a great use case for that. So yes, we do add those custom properties to objects to store further information about devices. Okay, Bear, right. Next question, I guess.
Yes, next question. This is an interesting one. I'm going to make an assumption about what you mean here. If you have additional context, please feel free to add it in the chat. And that is, do you have any suggestions for how to drive organizational adoption? I don't know if you're talking about like organizational adoption of a particular thing. Gang, my interpretation of this is like, how do we drive better organizational adoption of Lucid? Do any of you interpret that question any differently?
That is my interpretation.
Okay, great. So I have thoughts and opinions about this. Obviously, I work on like the learning and the training team. First of all, Lucid has some methodologies about how to drive organizational adoption of Lucid software. So again, if you have an enterprise account, if you're considering upgrading to an enterprise account, in our implementation, we kind of work with you on this. We also have services, again, that you can purchase, where we can come in and consult with you and work really, really closely with you. But if you're looking for just some free thoughts and options, here are a couple of thoughts I have for you. One of the best things that you can do to drive organizational adoption is immediately identify 2 or 3 use cases that are fairly simple and easy to adopt, and then kind of rally and standardize those use cases. The two that we see the most often that are wildly successful for organizations is documentation in Lucid and meetings in Lucid. And so what we typically will tell organizations is something along the lines of, hey, you're going to do all of your process and or systems diagram documentation in Lucid. And instead of saying that we're going to go in and we're going to update all of the current documentation in Lucid, we'll say, here is kind of like a drop dead date. And starting on this date, all new documentation will be done using Lucid as a standard. And then we have a set of integrations that allow you to embed that documentation into SharePoint, into Confluence, or any of your internal wikis or Google Sites or knowledge bases. But you can create your documentation in Lucid. And once you have that date kind of set and everybody starts doing their documentation on that date, then over time, eventually all of your documentation gets updated and everyone gets used to doing documentation in Lucid. You can also work to create some standardized templates for what your documentation is so that you can better define what shapes and colors you want people to use so that you're using a very standard visual language across your organization. A second option, again, is meetings. And this one's a really easy one. This is the most accessible one. This is the one that I've seen be most successful, is we just say, hey, we want to have a Lucidspark board for every recurring meeting that we run. So this could be manager one-on-ones, it could be team syncs, it could be agile events, anywhere you're having meetings that you're having on a regular recurring basis, you can create Lucidspark boards that you can attach to your meetings, either through like one of our integrations, like the Google Calendar integration, or you can just drop the share link into the meeting invite, or have it attached to your Teams channel. And then everyone can kind of hop into this board whenever you have this meeting, and then you've got an agenda and you can kind of visualize what you're working on. And they're really great. I mean, you can see how we've kind of like been presenting inside of Lucid just in this webinar, but you can also use it to just kind of help facilitate your meetings. And again, once you standardize and get everybody using those particular use cases, then you can start diversifying and adding complexity to the types of use cases that you use and be really intentional and kind of go like team by team about what types of things that they want to do in Lucid versus things that you don't want to do in Lucid. So that's how I think about how to drive organizational adoption. Also, it's really helpful if you send people to training.lucid.co and have them focus on particularly our diagramming and our whiteboarding foundations badges. Those are really great for helping people not only learn best practices for diagramming and whiteboarding, but getting really familiar with our tools, Lucidchart and Lucidspark, for those use cases. The more people at your organizations that complete those badges, the smoother rollout and adoption tends to go for organizations. So those are some of my tips that can potentially help with that if that's something that you are interested in. Next question. I think this is probably, actually, we've only got a couple minutes left. We do have some more questions here, but I want to make sure that we get everything kind of like wrapped up here at the end. Gang, do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap everything up?
I think we answer the C4 question.
Okay. Okay. Great. That was the next one. That was the next one I was going to ask. Let's do the C4 question, and then we'll.
Dave's been wanting to answer this for a minute now, so
I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave, do you just want to read the question and answer it, because I was going to hand it to you anyway?
Yeah, perfect. What is the best way to enforce the standards, like following like C4 standards and shaped are only used for certain diagram types? Okay, the best way to do that is to create a template that has the appropriate shapes already part of that template. So the only shapes you see are the shapes that they should be using in that left-hand panel. Now, to add the C4 shapes, what you're going to want to do is currently you'll just Google C4 shapes Visio stencil file. Once you've done that, you can click on the More Shapes button. And then within Lucid, we give you the ability to create custom shape libraries. So for the question that was here around PNGs and a better way to do that, the custom shape libraries is the best way. And then we can actually import shapes from SVG files and from Visio stencil files. So I actually walked a customer through this last week on getting those C4 shapes into the canvas. And then once you have them set up in the My Shape library section, you can actually come down and, I have like value stream mapping and demo server rack shapes. Since I talked about these shapes previously, I'll go ahead and add these. But then I can also share these out with different individuals at my organization or with groups or teams. And then once those shapes are there in that left-hand side, I can then go ahead and just do file, convert to template. Now that's going to create a personal template. I can then share that out to individuals on my team, make it a team template. Or if you're really fancy, you can have a corporate template that provides that template to everybody within your organization. And so there's a lot of different options there, but definitely utilize those custom shape libraries. They make things a lot easier.
Right on. Thank you so much, Dave, for diving into that. I know we get questions about C4 all the time. And this is super helpful. All right, so we're here at the top of the hour. I want to be super respectful of your time and let you go. Thank you so much for joining us today. As a reminder, we're going to send an email out within the next day or so that will have resources, links, templates, etc., that will allow you to activate your knowledge from today's webinar. Also, don't sleep on the Lucid community. Definitely check out community.lucid.co. Jump into the IT community there. Also, we do have a few extra questions that didn't get answered, and we might try to solve that by putting some of those questions and answers in the chat specifically for people who attended this webinar. So you could check out that forum in the community whenever it gets posted. So definitely go join the community, be on the lookout for that email. And otherwise, just thanks so much for joining us today. And as always, happy diagramming, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.